So here we are on section 5. Now you're an expert. Well, you are more of an expert than you were to start with, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. But now let's take the tests a little bit further. Some more things to think about. So I've mentioned usability testing previously, and it is a really good way of discovering a lot more from actually sitting people down and letting them walk through your site, what they're doing, and their thought processes. It doesn't require a great investment of internet traffic. You don't have to try and get a lot more visitors. You just need a few people to actually sit down and go through things with and hear their thinking. And it really can come up with and identify a lot. And that observation can lead to a lot of ideas which you may not have actually come to from any other means. Another great way of finding more information about your site and your customers is to do surveys. Short surveys, so short questionnaires either on paper or on the site. They could pop up, but don't make annoying pop-ups which actually stop people doing anything on your site. Use a service such as SurveyMonkey, which will do things properly. It could ask customers about the pricing. If the pricing is clear, an e-commerce company might email their customers instead, asking them if they've praised or criticised their sites to friends, and what it was all about, whether they enjoyed the experience. Just don't annoy people. Nobody likes to be hassled to do a survey too often. So a couple of questions is probably all you need to actually give a lot of information. Heat maps. I've mentioned these before. Even with low traffic to your site, they can reveal a lot of interesting things. They can show which parts of the site are getting too much attention that you may not have realised and what's being ignored. They can also identify things that are just distracting, that you hadn't expected them to actually get that much attention, but something about them is getting a lot more notice than you would have imagined. They can also help identify just how far pages are being scrolled and whether your A/B test might be suffering because people can't see things, they're too far down the page or hidden some way. And I've mentioned crazyegg.com already, an excellent service to set up heat maps simply and get the feedback you need. Another thing you might need to do, and probably should nowadays, is optimize across devices. So does touch affect your testing? If people are coming to your A/B test and they're on a tablet, is it acting the same way? If they're on a phone, are the screen sizes actually, does it work? Does the A/B test operate as you imagined it to? Is it responsive at all? How about personalization? Does that make a difference? So if your site actually says, "Hello Lee," rather than just, "Do you need help?" "Hello Lee, do you need help?" Does that make a difference? Personalisation of course to action. Are they better than generalised? And how does that work on the phone as well? Is it a good experience as people actually identify their phones and tablets as more personal devices on them all the time? So a quick word on testing whole pages. It's just as valid, but it's a higher level approach. You need to actually take very different approaches in your two different versions. So different layout, different graphic design, different styles, different tones of voice, all different kinds of things to create two very different experiences and to see if there's a difference in conversion between the two. So you do risk confusing a visitor who may be visiting on two different devices, two different IP addresses, different machines. They could end up seeing potentially a different page, and this could lead to a bit of confusion. I'd imagine most people that isn't the case, so it's probably a limited audience who you would confuse, but it's a risk. So you also don't really know which part of the page it was that worked. So with so many variables, because you haven't done a slower iterative test, you don't know which part of that change had the impact. You don't know if it was layout, tone of voice, graphic design, whatever. You just can't tell because you've made such a radical change, and that's the problem. But you might be able to work out some of this by doing interviews or face-to-face testing, or using services such as Verify app, which is online remote testing where people video their experience and talk through what they're doing. So knowing which aspect was the key factor to improving things is it's the key factor behind this type of approach. You just need to know what it was rather than the whole thing. It could have been the whole thing that was better, but more often than not it's probably some particular aspect. You should probably look at return users and treat them a little bit differently as well, because return users may skip parts that they already know of your site and take different routes to your site objectives. So what works for new users may not work for returning users. So you need to explore different ways of framing the same message. So the calls to action need to be looked at in different ways to test different user journeys. For example, rather than testing a homepage call to action, you may want to look at the analytics to see where return users are joining the site, which key pages, and test calls to action on those pages in particular. So you need to observe and experiment and see how A/B tests can improve and change things for these return users as well. Now lastly, testing on mobile. Now I mentioned this earlier. Though not directly always for the web, a lot of these services which are springing up quite often for mobile apps, but I fully expect more mobile specific testing services to appear because so much traffic is now on mobile, so much e-commerce is being done on mobile. I think the whole experience of responsive A/B testing is going to really boom. And there are many more of these than I've listed here. It's a highly lucrative competitive advantage to A/B test options. So for app releases, they do test multiple versions of apps with slight variations to track better performance, which is something I didn't realise. So hotel booking applications, you may actually be downloading different versions on the App Store than another person without your knowledge. And those tests are carrying on and they're ongoing and helping to improve the products. So in the next section, we're going to look quickly at A/B testing email campaigns.